Oh, these are going to be good. All right, for those of you who are listening and not watching this podcast, yes, I am barbecuing. I had the opportunity to give a keynote speech at the Bushcraft Symposium in Alberta, Canada. And they asked me to speak on the difference between bushcraft, primitive earth skills, survival skills, and that was my approach. But they also asked me to address an elephant in the room. Now, I'm not going to tell you what that is. You're going to have to listen to see where it goes. But in any event, and without further ado, this is my keynote at the Bushcraft Symposium in Alberta, Canada. We spoke last night, and one of the things we talked about was, actually, we said addressing the elephant in the room, which I'm going to do a little bit later on. And I'm not even going to tell you what the elephant is. But we are going to address the elephant in the room. And but before that, what I wanted to talk about when we chatted on the phone was differentiating some of these terms so we understand what it is we're talking about. Basically, I have an opinion. That's it. I have an opinion on the matter. But it developed over many, many years of training in survival and teaching survival. And that is this, that there are, we'll call it, I've got 5 terms. The 5th one is the elephant in the room. The 4th one we can sort of just let be as is, but I'll tell you what their names are. The first one is survival skills. The second one is bushcraft. The third one is primitive earth technology. And the 4th one is emergency preparedness. Now, I believe there's actually quite a difference in these skills. Yes, if you're saying it in your head, they absolutely dovetail. They absolutely support each other, and you can cross-reference them depending on what's going on. But it became important, especially with the way things went after the Survivorman series started, in my head, to start getting people to understand that there's a difference in some of these skills, that there's a magic and a power in these various skills. So survival for me it's really quite simple. It's whatever you got to do to stay alive. This is the thing, and this is the thing that's been a little bit disappointing. Now, Andre and I spoke to this briefly. He said, no, there's a reason to be for, say, recreational survival, and I agree. That's how we practice. That's how we get out with our buddies. That's how we train in these things, is recreational survival. However, the topic of survival itself is not pretty. It's not fun. It's ugly. It sucks. There's only one thing you want to do in a survival situation. Go home. That's it. And that difference became very important to me because it's painful to be out there and to sleep on a rock. It's not cool. It's not even machismo because you end up whimpering like a little baby. When you wake up at 3 in the morning and that chill runs up your spine and it's raining and you're on a rock, you just want a piece of toast and peanut butter and your mom. Okay, did I say that out loud? So, you see, to me, survival, survival is Yossi Ginsberg in the jungle. Survival is Dougal Robertson and his family. Survival is, you know these stories. That's survival. Do you think any one of them would say, I'd rather have stayed out there and worked on my A-frame shelter? I wish I could have tanned a hide while I was there. Darn it. No, they just wanted to go home. And this has always been an important thing to me. This is why in my series Survivorman, I never allowed, well, we'll get there in more detail, but the bottom line is I never allowed the sensationalism of the skills. Because the skills that I was showing in Survivorman, I'd already been learning, practicing, and teaching for 15 years before that, so I was in love with the skills. I will come back to that in a bit. I want to move from survival to bushcraft. So that's my underpinning for survival. It's whatever you have to do to stay alive, to get out alive, to get home and hug your family again. So in other words, if you got to burn down an island to get rescued, burn down the island. That is survival with all its warts showing. Bushcraft, well, that's opening up Morris's book and drooling and thinking about all these different things you can do while you're out there enjoying nature. I'm going to say this now, and I'll probably say it again. Bushcraft skills are about thriving in the wilderness, not surviving in the wilderness. Now, yes, you can utilize these skills to survive if you have them, if you know them, if you practice them. They can come out. As I said, there is the dovetailing. But to me, bushcraft survival is predominantly those skills of the coureurs de bois, of the voyageurs, of the mountain men, of the pioneers, of the settlers. They involved really knowing how to sharpen an axe. That's the best one for me. Really knowing how to sharpen a blade. And the various methods of fire starting. Whittling, carving, chopping, building, snares and traps and deadfalls, shelters, all of those things. So they're all really powerful, beautiful skills. And all of us, by the way, I've got a friend here with me tonight who's actually presenting as well, and I gave him required watching, which is, of course, Jeremiah Johnson. So for all of you, I see a lot of young faces here, and to me, young is under 40. If you don't watch Jeremiah Johnson once a year, get out right now. And if you watch Revenant and like it, get out right now. Yeah. I'm giving up the ghost too early here. We'll go there. Okay. So bushcraft survival are these sets of skills that came along in that era. And everything has its predecessor. The same thing for me with primitive earth technology. These are the skills that aren't necessarily based on the technology that came along with, say, a voyageur, but was the original technology. It goes back thousands of years. And again, a beautiful set of skills. So this is me and David Halliday sitting in the desert on our butts with our hands, and him explaining to me how to do the itsy bitsy spider move. To get that, he only told me? Yeah, thank you, Dave. To get the hand drill going. These primitive earth skills come from thousands of years of practice. And again, though, one of the things I learned, I spent a year living in the woods, and I'll get back to that. One of the things I learned was aloneness sucks. You need a community. Those skills are often primarily based on community skills. Why? Because when I look at some of the arrowheads that are made here, I could never come close to doing that kind of arrowhead or that kind of twining. There are certain things, though, I can do. Let me do that. That's my role in the community. Aloneness in traditional, original Aboriginal cultures was considered a banishment because you need the snowshoe maker, you need the hunter, the person who does the fishing, the basketry, the clay pottery, the shelter, the child rearing, on and on it goes. These things, we can be generalists, we can be Renaissance people, but the reality is we are not going to be good at all of those skills. You learn that quick when you get in the outdoors. The minute you think you are the best atlatl maker, along comes Mac Graham. And you realize, oh, I didn't think of doing it that way. Last night, I was just, watching Patrick's slides up on the screen. I can't do stuff like that. It was beautiful craftsmanship. So I'd want to hang with him when I need some hooks made. So this, for me, for example, you grow into loving these different skills within bushcraft, within primitive earth technology, and within survival. They each have these different sets of skills associated with them, and though they seem relative, they really come from these three areas, and you do first grow to fall in love with all of them, but then you figure out which ones you're good at. I was always really good at rope making. I was pretty good at fire starting, but again, don't ask me to flint knap you an arrowhead. I'm going to go to David for that, So, however, where do they dovetail? Where do they cross over? Well, primarily within the scope of primitive technology and bushcraft, it's all about just adapting and realizing that something that they do in the Amazon is different than what they do in the Arctic or over in Madagascar, but yet there's a connection there, and maybe I can adapt it. Funnily enough, you cannot always adapt it. Things you can do in Arizona don't work in Ontario, right? So, but you start to experiment with all of that. So I want to get back to survival. In survival, you're borrowing from bushcraft, you're borrowing from primitive earth technology, again, to just go home alive. Like what? Well, for example, I remember in one particular episode, I wanted to show charred cloth. Now, on its surface, charred cloth is a bushcraft, a beautiful, awesome, making charred cloth and getting your knuckles bloody as you bang against the flint with that piece of steel that you bought from the guy who makes them with the little curl thing. You know what I'm talking about, right? And so to me, that was really beautiful, because what was I doing when I was doing that? I was pretending I was Jeremiah Johnson. Remember? You know the scene. You all know the scene with the snow and the tree up above, right? So, but in survival, has that got any place? No. Well, maybe. If you can understand the concepts from bushcraft and from primitive earth technology, you can then look at your horrifying situation and potentially say, extend the life of your fire-making ability. So you've only got 3 matches, or no matches, or a lighter with a limited amount of fuel. But you realize there's some canvas there, and it's 100% cotton, and there's some tin over there. Oh. And now you're starting to dovetail. You're starting to draw upon the bushcraft skill of rock and steel. And so I did that. I took canvas, put it in squares, and I didn't have a tin with a lid, like we all, we get our little cookie tin and we go to the fire and poke the hole in it, and you know how it's done. Take a piece of tin, well, how can I do this? So I folded tin over tin over tin, like you'd fold a bed sheet, put it in the fire, and damn it if it didn't work. Now I had charred cloth, a big supply of it. I don't even need to touch my lighter. That is where survival learns from bushcraft. That is where survival learns from primitive skills. Because I have never really done a primitive earth skill on Survivorman that I necessarily needed to do, because there were uglier ways of accomplishing what I needed to do. But the primitive earth skills and the bushcraft skills I was in love with, and they were beautiful to show. And again, if you understand them, you can then bring them into this, into that, again, horrible, painful, terrible moment called survival. And anybody who's ever actually had a real survival ordeal is not disagreeing with me right now. They would not go back there for anything. And if they did, then it wasn't really survival. They were up the back of their cottage and they stayed for 3 days. And they kind of knew how to get home. You can't find me. So this was a perspective that I spoke with Chris and David on the phone and said that I wanted to kind of, in many ways, what you're looking at is a guy who baselines everything. I don't specialize in much of it. I'm not that good at specializing. And so this, I hope, is a bit of a baseline for understanding all of the skills that are out there. Now that leads me to something that is probably the most important of all of this. The reason. The motivation. So, in a Survivorman episode, there's not one single show that I ever produced where I did not start every single day of that ordeal, whatever I'd manufactured and put together so that I could go and experience it and film it and make the film. I sat down beside a rock or a river or a lake, and I just meditated, and I said, whatever it is I do today, let it be inspiring to people and let it bring a positive change in people's lives. That was my that was my spiritual motivation. And then I would go on to film my episode. Before I get to my emotional motivation, is to say this, that I would then often stand up and go, dolt, you're going to do a fireboat today. Well, who cares? It's not motivational. That's not, who cares? But then I would start to get these letters from people. And I'm going to tell you, because I know you guys will recognize this, because I'm sure many of you also work with individuals that need to get out into nature to get their life in check, to get back on balance. This is what nature does. I was in Nashville, and I put out a little tweet. Hey, I'm going to go down to the Frothy Monkey, have a cappuccino. Anybody want to meet me? A son and a stepfather show up, and stepfather says, well, we drove 2.5 hours to come to meet you. He's your biggest fan. So, yeah, okay, shake hands, photographs, autographs. We're talking. He's a young boy, about 13 or so. Hands me a letter, and then says, you can't read it while I'm here. It's from my mom. Okay, great. Day goes on. I'm thinking nothing of this. I pull the letter out, and I start to read it. And same opening, my son is your biggest fan. You don't know what it means to him that he met you. And for the first 5 years of his life, he watched me getting beat to within an inch of my life by his father, who held us captive. And when I asked him how he got through it, he said, well, Mommy, if Survivorman can do it, then so can I. This is the impact your little bush skills can have on people. This is the farther reaching emotional, spiritual power that bushcraft and primitive earth technology and getting through a survival ordeal can have on individuals. And that's one story. There are others, and I know you have those stories as well. So that was my, we'll call it my more spiritual motivation. But I had an emotional motivation as well. A subtext. An underlying subtext to everything Survivorman was ever about or meant to do. I just wanted to get people back out in the bush. That's it. That's where it started from. That's why I went out and went down to Randolph, Kansas, and learned with Prairie Wolf. That's why I went out and sought out David Halliday. That's why I bought David Westcott's book and Morris Chansky's book and all the other books and poured through them. That's why I read all the survival stories like Douglas Mawson and This Accursed Land, all of these incredible survival stories. The real reason was I just wanted to reconnect with the land. I really wanted to reconnect with nature. And these felt like ways to challenge myself, yes. And they were a bit sensational in themselves, but I wanted to connect. And so when you look at bushcraft, and then you're looking at skills that force you to slow down and touch things, to touch the earth, to touch the land. I wasn't going to go here, but I am right now because a friend of mine that's here, we're doing some filmmaking recently, and I started talking on camera about something, and I realized that, you know, we all know the five senses. There is a sixth sense. I'm not talking about psychic ability, although it is somewhat psychic. And the sixth sense is when all five senses work together in perfect harmony. And the only time that really happens is out in nature. That's when they all fire. So what are bushcraft skills and primitive earth technology to that? They are facilitators. It's facilitation. It gets you out looking and discovering what a basswood tree is. It gets you knowing what obsidian is and what you can do with it. It gets you twisting root fibers. What the heck is that? Whoa, I'm making rope. But you're twisting fibers. You're sitting on the ground. You're not on a chair. And it's facilitation. Survivorman was, for me, facilitation. I was trying to just get people excited about nature again. These are just some skills I had been doing for 15 years before, and I was in love with them. I thought, there's a connection here. So this is the motivation, and this is why I say I speak in baseline terms, because I want you to remember that with the beauty and the nuances that are there, with the skill sets that all of these individuals in the room have that are far superior to mine, you can see the fruition of what starts with a lot of people who really just want to hang out in the woods and understand the woods and know a tree and connect to a river. That's what all of these skills are, taking our passion for nature and facilitating our ability to be out in it and learning from it. And as I said, with the beautiful slides we saw last night, you see, you know, craftsmanship that is next level kind of thing. So I will go to the elephant in the room, as they said, which is the fifth. I didn't even say the fourth. By the way, the fourth category, emergency preparedness. Why that one? Because, well, the world's about to blow up, so we got to know what's going on. It is a category in of its own. It also can steal and take from primitive earth skills and bushcraft. It also can learn from practical survival techniques, the preppers, all that sort of stuff. So there's a swirling pot of skills going on here. Edible wild plants, medicinal plants, all of these things are a swirling bunch of skills that have to do with the land, but with the exception, really, of emergency preparedness. That's an urban thing, but it is, to me, another category. So why? Well, that's got nothing to do with it. You fill up your bathtub with water, you call your... Yeah, well, you know what? But if it's a really, really long time, you might need to get a fire going in your backyard. And you might be out of matches. And if you know how to do the fire bow, and there's a bunch of wood pallets over there, but you've got a broom handle that happens to be poplar, you know, and there's a cedar fence railing, like all of a sudden you're going, I'm the only guy in the neighborhood who's got a fire going. You know, the lights are out. It's a blackout, but I got a fire going. So you see, emergency preparedness can even learn from primitive earth skills and from bushcraft skills. To go to the elephant in the room, which is the fifth category, television survival. Yeah. Sorry. Why is it even an elephant in the room? For this, I need to give you a little bit of a history lesson.
All right, that's the end of part one of my keynote at the Bushcraft Symposium. And as you can see, I left us with a little bit of a teaser there. They asked me to speak on the subject of survival on television. That was the elephant in the room. You got to understand, there's 500 or 600 people there, and they were all bushcraft nuts, survival nuts, primitive earth technology nuts, probably some preppers as well. So, of course, that's my background. Survivorman was the zeitgeist, essentially, of survival TV as we all know it now. And so I was asked to speak to that and address that, and I do, coming up in part two of my keynote at the Bushcraft Symposium.